Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our Generation Z webinar. It's great to have so many of you on here. My name's Claire and I'm Business Development and Training Manager for SkyPeople Training, and I'm joined by Emily, who you're going to hear from shortly, who is our Learning and Development Manager. If you have any questions as we go along, just pop them in the chat box and we'll get around to answering them at the end. So we're just going to start with a little bit about us. At SkyPeople Training, we aim to be industry leaders in cabin crew training and recruitment. Not only do we assist airlines in their training their cabin crew, but we also offer a whole host of services to airlines, from writing manuals and to managing their crew. As a cabin crew training organisation, we deliver cabin crew attestation training to airlines in the UK, Europe and worldwide. We deliver training on specialist subjects such as dangerous goods, security, crew resource management, and provide teaching and learning courses for operators to be able to develop their own instructors. We also recruit cabin crew on behalf of a number of airlines, and we're also keynote speakers and have delivered at aviation conferences around the world. We also work with a number of education settings to support college students moving up into the workplace, and we aim to bridge the gap between education and industry. So that's just a little bit about us. So let's talk Gen Z. So how did it all start? We had been approached by IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, back in 2023. And we were asked to deliver a keynote speech at their World Safety Conference in Vietnam. We were asked to research Gen Z in the workplace and the challenges we face in aviation with this new generation. So in the first initial stages of the research, from a business point of view, we had to understand actually what the challenges were. And from conversations with our customers and research within our industry, this is what we found. So you can see here on the screen, 74% of business leaders say they find Gen Z more difficult to work with than any other generation. Now, 74%, that's a huge number, which leads us to think, why are they more difficult to work with than anyone else? 12% say that they have fired a Gen Z employee within a week of them starting. And there are also different attitudes in the workplace behaviour. According to data from 2022, they are the most disengaged generational group at work. And they also report more overall stress and work-related burnout than any other generation. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm just going to show you a few verbatim comments from our research. So when we got this back in, we were absolutely overwhelmed with all the comments, and these are just a few here to share with you. So if you have a little look through some of those comments, you can see that there's many pain points there, but they're all quite similar. There's comments about mobile phones being a huge issue, social media, no accountability, no resilience, short attention spans. They're all very similar. The one I really like is this one here. Where do I start? A lot of Gen Z just want to be on their phones. They have no concept of having to work hard for something. They don't understand the concept of no. They're without question the hardest group to teach. Not all, but a good 75%. Excuses for plenty for failures. No concept of accountability, nor knowing when to apologise. Draining the life out of me. Rules don't matter and social media is king. The art of conversation is a rare skill and is a joy when a learner has it. I think the way these Zeds have been educated and the lack of discipline is apparent. And that was from a millennial there. So that one really kind of stands out for me, that comment. So having got a lot of data and done a lot of research, we thought we've got to find a way that we can support and help engage this generation alongside the others in the workplace. I'm just going to hand you over to Emily now, just to explain a bit further.
So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on Gen Z. So, as Claire had said, this is something we've been working on for about a year now. We've taken this to different conferences around the world, and it is slowly changing and adapting to more relevant times and as we go along with more research. But we are going to go right back to basics. Some of you may have been involved or seen our discussions in the past at previous conferences, but I think it's really important to actually identify who the generations are and how many generations we have in our workplace. So on the bottom of the screen, you'll see there is a QR code. Could I ask that you just quickly scan the QR code for me? And the question is going to be, what generation are you? So whilst you're just doing that, I'm just going to introduce to you the 4 generations in the workplace. So Gen Z, so the generation Z would be born between 1997 and 2012. So we'd make the youngest generation Z 12, and the oldest would be 27 years old. Millennials would have been born in 1981 to 1996. So that makes them between 28 and 43 years old. Gen X would have been born between 1965 and 1980, which makes them between 44 to 59 years old. And then baby boomers born between 1946 to 1964, which would then make them 60 to 78-year-olds. So as you can see, we currently have 4 generations in the workplace. So I'd love now to identify who on the webinar fits into those categories. And from there, we will discuss a little further. So live data is coming in. So thank you for those of you that have participated. I can see currently we have 12 responses. However, it does have a little delay, so we may see a change. But just manipulating the data there, we can see that actually we have 0 Generation Zs attending this webinar. We have 25% of you fit into the millennial category. And then, oh, no, we do have a Generation Z. 61% of you Generation X. And then a small percentage of you are baby boomers. So what I have done at conferences is this is how I've started the talk. And it's been really interesting, people standing up to highlight who the generations are that are attending these webinars and these conferences. And the one thing that I really do highlight and start off with is the fact that we're talking about Generation Z in the workplace. However, there are very few Generation Zs actually attending these workshops. So actually, are they working alongside the correct management people within the airlines? But that's something we will look at in a little bit. So again, thank you so much. I can see that actually Generation X here, there is a higher percentage of you who have attended the conference this evening. Cool. Second. Slight technical problem. Hang on, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and then I will share it again. Okay, so moving on then, this here, to look at this comment. So the children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise. So again, this is actually a comment I start off with because I think it's really interesting. And I would ask, actually, what generation do you think this has come from out of the 4 generations that actually are currently in the workplace? Now, the argument is actually it could potentially come from 3 of the generations because it isn't a new phenomenon. In fact, this comment came from Socrates in the 4th century BC. So as I say, this is not a new phenomenon. This is something that, after all, we've been complaining about for decades. And that comment, kids these days, So looking down on young adults in such a long established and innate instinct is in fact very normal. And research shows that we project our current selves onto our past selves, unconsciously comparing who we are today to today's young people. So it might be that you remember the term Generation Snowflake. So in 2016, the phrase Generation Snowflake was added to the Collins English Dictionary to describe adults who were born between 1980 and 1994. And the term was, in fact, they're less resilient and more prone to taking offence to situations than previous generations. So reality is the Gen Zers have had, in fact, a variety of challenges than other generations, and they've not had the same experiences at this stage of life that they are currently in. So most notably would be the global pandemic, and also the pressure of instant gratification from social media communities that they have on tap with their smartphones. So add in the mental health challenges of social distancing and isolating during the pandemic, and also distance learning, there's challenges that organisations and in fact schools had during the time. You can start to understand actually why the Generation Z have a different perception on life. So let's have a look at why the Generation Z is taking the world by storm. Because let's face it, as Claire had said, we are hearing this a lot. So what I want you to do is start to understand why they're taking the world by storm and to really put yourselves into their shoes. So the first thing that we noticed from the research is actually a really positive thing. The younger generation are eager to learn, more creative and highly independent. Now, after all, they are considered the digital generation because they have been born in that digital era. So when you think about learning and how, even from the millennials, how we've learned has been very, very different over the years to how the Generation Z currently learn. The example I use, and I've used this at conferences, you may have heard it before, but my coffee machine broke. And when my coffee machine broke, all I had to do was go onto YouTube, Google how to fix my coffee machine, watch a video, and then immediately I became that coffee engineer. So I was able to fix my coffee machine in a matter of minutes. Whereas in the past, to learn to do these skills, we would have had to have gone a really long way around achieving the same outcome, and in fact probably spending a lot of money doing that as well. So if we bring that into the current learning context that we have within our airlines and organizations, is that perhaps something that is currently causing those pain points, that the younger generation want that instant learning because that's what they're used to. However, the older generation, and perhaps those that are the instructors and management, are actually delivering the information incorrectly. So it's food for thought as to actually, is that currently being done the correct way? Another thing that I see as being really positive is the fact that they are more innovative and entrepreneurial than previous generations. So if you think about Gen Z, they've lived through an era of booming entrepreneurship. With the likes of Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, we've got Bill Gates, Apple. The example I've used is Stephen Bartlett, only because I love listening to his podcast, and so do millions of others, who is a 30-year-old entrepreneur and podcaster. So in fact, he doesn't really sit in that Gen Z category. However, he is seen as a role model within the younger generations. Someone else as well is Greta Thunberg, so the Swedish activist who, as we know, promotes climate change, whose net worth is £2 million, which is a lot of money. So we need to understand then what these generations are taking the world by storm, and there are some real positives that we can take from it. They are more socially conscious, so they are more aware of climate change. They expect organisations to be sustainable, which is in fact really challenging within aviation, as we are probably the worst industry who lives the worst footprint when it comes to climate change and sustainability. Another thing that we noticed during our research is the younger generation are a lot happier to express their feelings. So one of the words, or when I was doing my research, one of the conversations I had with an instructor within an airline was the fact that during boarding, the APUs, the auxiliary power unit on the aircraft had broken. And the younger girl had decided that she was going to offload herself from the aircraft. Now, in that moment in time, everyone was in uproar that she didn't feel comfortable and wanted to offload herself. So that raised concerns. Another example is during a learning, within a learning environment where the mock-up was in fact really hot. The learning environment wasn't conducive for really effective learning. The learners stepped up and said, "We want to be in here. I want to leave." Now, what we're seeing is, as I said, they're really expressing their feelings. From other generations, they actually see this as a sign of weakness and vulnerability. So you probably have even thought it yourself before, suck it up and get on with it. When I was younger, I would have had to have done that. So why is this now happening? So what we're seeing is a real shift in perception. So how the younger generation are viewing the world. And we could really take this into human factors, looking at perception and why, in fact, the younger generation do see things differently. But for now, we're just keeping it a real general overview. So from this, we then wanted to have a look at, well, okay, how do Generation Z see the world? And a word that came up a lot was, in fact, truth. They want to see the truth. What is the truth? Where is the truth? This has been broken down into 4 different areas. One of the areas is being individual, so individualism. And that individualism, and you may have heard the young generation express this before, don't define yourself only in one way. So what they want to do is really express their individual truth. So from an organization, an airline, and industries, the challenge is old ways of working, old company cultures, behaviors, and values. And actually, do your company, your airlines, cultures, behaviors, and values meet that expressing individual truth? Now, conversations I've had with people around this is we are seeing airlines really shift this and allowing the younger generation to express their individualism. And we've seen this with airlines changing uniform standards. If we look back to only probably pre-COVID, uniform standards are very different to how they are now. So the idea here is to get you being aware of why perhaps companies are changing the ways that they are doing things. And in fact, if there are challenges within your organization, then are your culture, behaviors, and values something that perhaps need to be looked into? Another point here is they are radically inclusive. So inclusivity, we talk about a lot, and we see that as a really positive thing, which it absolutely is. And what we want is to connect through different truths. So the saying here is we each have our own style and way of being. What binds us is that we accept and understand everyone's styles. So what's really interesting here with this and being radically inclusive is they don't distinguish between friends they meet online and friends in the physical world. And they continually flow through communities that actually are promoting their cause. So the challenges we see here with organizations is, in fact, they have no loyalty to one organization or industry, because after all, they expect industries to be inclusive and people can come and go and freely be themselves, and they see no problem with that. And therefore, as I said, they're flowing through communities that then promote their causes. So if they feel that as an organization or an airline, we're not promoting the causes, so we talk a lot about being sustainable and inclusive, if we're not promoting those, then they will freely flow and move to another airline. Another thing we looked at was communication. So communication is obviously a really broad term here, but when it comes to communication, it's about understanding different truths. So they're very open to understanding different truths. And the term here is we must practice tolerance and we must learn to listen and accept differences. So what they don't like is confrontation. However, they are happy to have these conversations through dialogue, so having conversations, which is perhaps why for some of us in the older generation categories really struggle with the younger generation when they are perhaps challenging us or airing their concerns through dialogue. But for an organisation, the challenge is to actually change and shift individual and personal beliefs. So, for example, in CRM, human factors, it's all about changing beliefs and changing attitudes so they can fit into the community safely and work effectively. So it's difficult. If they have a personal belief, they will always stick to those personal beliefs and they are really difficult to change. Another sort of concern or warning sign here is the fact they're willing to accommodate failings of a company. You may have heard this term or someone say this before, that's just the way it is. So that's just the way it is, that in fact the CSAT scores are low, that's just the way it is, and not really taking that word, when we hear the word a lot, accountability for why that's happening. But hopefully this is giving you a little idea and a different perspective of where that is in fact coming from. Another point we found here is, in fact, they are realistic and in fact very pragmatic. So with regards to that, they are unveiling the truth behind all things. So the term here is, let's be real, tell me what's going on and let me make my own decisions. So the young generation, they want that control. So they want that information to then make their own decisions and to take on that control. So for airlines, the challenge there is they're not wanting to share vulnerable data because they fear that if they share vulnerable data, then they might lose their people or reputation. So the word I said, accountability, has been thrown around a lot in doing the research, and it's been very much the young generation aren't holding themselves accountable. However, I think it's important that we as organisations look into our system and think, actually, our processes and procedures, and are we holding ourselves accountable for the promises that we are in fact making. So hopefully that's given you, sort of as an organisation, as an airline, an overview as to perhaps why these challenges are coming about. Moving on to the generation and what's unique about their learning style. I mean, as we know, learning styles, everyone has their own individual learning styles, their own preferences of learning. But from our research, we found that actually holding organisations accountable, they're happy, sorry, to hold organisations accountable for not being inclusive. So if inclusivity is not role modelled in a learning environment, they will disengage. And this was something that we really looked into with our own content at SkyPeople Training, and we looked into how we can be more inclusive with our PowerPoints and the people that also work within our organisation. So we need to be role modelling it, and the easiest way to do that in a learning environment is actually make everyone feel like they belong by being inclusive with the PowerPoints and the pictures that we use, and also the language. So the research that we did a year ago showed that 89% of Gen Zers, when asked how they prefer to learn, in fact answered face-to-face and practical training, with one-to-one training being mentioned a number of times, which you're probably thinking, how do you get around one-to-one training in a very fast-paced environment with a big group of learners? So one thing that we have noticed with our research, and it goes to actually what we were talking about with the truth and wanting realistic views, is they actually have a very pragmatic approach to learning. So you may, if you have young children or children in that generation, you may get frustrated with, they're always saying, oh, there's a better way of doing that. And what they will do is utilise the digitalisation to support that. So are we in the industries using digitalization effectively to actually do things better. So we are all going to be going through a generation of AI. In fact, even Gen Z, the generations in the workplace now, aren't familiar with it. So for all of us, we're going to be going on this big journey with AI. How it's going to look, who knows? It's quite exciting. I know some people are also anxious about it, but from a learning point of view, how can AI actually do things better, and how can we approach things better to actually really support the learners within that environment? That pragmatic approach. So if we think about learners with that pragmatic approach, they need to have the opportunity to put into practice what is being learnt. So in a classroom environment, it's really important to keep the sessions engaged and practical, because that is the best way to approach this style of learning. Feedback as well is important, and that's what they want. When it comes to feedback, there's a lot of needing that positive affirmation to keep them motivated. However, they want that feedback from a credible expert. So it's really important that we are keeping those boundaries between our learners to ensure we stay credible in order to give that really effective feedback to shift any change. Oh, sorry. And then just another point there with learners from a pragmatic point of view, they learn less when they cannot see any benefit in what they are learning. And I think this possibly is one of the challenges we currently find. So we have a lot of content that from a regulator's perspective has to be covered and delivered. And if the learner can't see the benefit in why they're sitting there for X amount of time learning a particular subject, then are they going to switch off from it? We're really starting to see a shift within learning in aviation. And I think this is really coming down now to the way that learners are wanting things differently. So competency-based training, for example, is really starting to come in the UK for dangerous goods. That's something that now is mandatory, and it's something we've brought into our product. And we also look at competency-based training from a first aid perspective. Moving forward, that competency-based training is probably going to come through all of the modules. What's different with competency-based training is we can almost give them the answer to the exam, but actually what we want to see is how are they getting to that end point. So I think it's going to really shift our approach to learning moving forward. So thinking about this big situation that we're in, and how do we get out of this sticky situation, we have been working and talking with other airlines and attending these conferences to see actually what do other airlines do. One thing that we noticed from a few airlines, which was really interesting, was in fact they completely knocked down their training department in people terms, and then built it back up. And what they've done is rebuilt the training department's mindset and philosophy, and they've changed the language that they're using. And instead of using words like checking, they're using words like coaching and mentoring. But one of their main focuses was, in fact, instructor development. If the instructors aren't confident in what they're delivering from a competency-based training point of view, or their mindset or philosophy is not the right approach, then that's obviously going to have that impact further down with the learners. Another thing that airlines are doing is understanding and raising awareness within aviation communities on the unconscious biases held towards all generations in the workplace. So we've sort of termed it generation diversity. We have held SkyPeople training workshops to airlines and continue to do that moving forward. And ultimately, it's raising awareness within all the people within the airlines that, in fact, this isn't a new phenomenon, and we ourselves have unconscious biases towards different generations. So it's really looking inwards and looking at how we can actually make a difference. The third thing here is using cabin crew competencies, and airlines are using these competencies now to really benchmark what's required and to identify the areas that require improvement, whether that's in knowledge, skills, or behaviours based outlook. So when it comes to cabin crew competencies, and I really wanted something for you all to take away from this workshop this evening, and I've brought in the cabin crew competencies, or ICAO's cabin crew competencies. Now, it's all very overwhelming, and we can probably identify a lot of skill gaps from the younger generation coming into the workplace. But I think what we need to do is keep it simple and not be too overwhelmed with all the challenges that we're currently faced. So when it comes to ICAO cabin crew competencies, there are 7 of them. So applications of policies and procedures. So are the policies and procedures within your organization or airline, are they fit for purpose? So are they in fact fit for the younger generation coming through, but also you've got the older generation in the workplace too. So that's one of the first places to really look at and identify what do we need to change. You could also use this as a competency to benchmark where your airline currently is and perhaps what better would look like moving forwards. Another competency is communication. So again, you can identify where there are the gaps within communication. What does really good look like, and how, as an airline or organisation, are you going to get there? Leadership and teamwork. And I think perhaps this is probably one of the key areas of potential weakness from the conversations I hear with the young generation coming through. And some of that is, in fact, even self-leadership and actually the teamwork and integrating well within a team. And as Clare had said, there was a high percentage of young generation coming into the workplace and then actually being fired quite soon on because they're just not fitting in. So again, that's another competency that airlines could focus on. From an airline point of view as well, passenger management, ultimately the cabin crew are there for the passenger safety. So from a cabin crew competency, what does that passenger management look like? Conflict management obviously has been thrown around quite a lot in recent times with the conferences I've gone to. So what do those competencies need to look like? What does good look like for your organisation? Another skill here is problem solving and decision making. And you'll probably start to realise that some of this is in some of those CRM markers, human factor markers that we talk about throughout our training. So how can we identify that these competencies are being met or not being met throughout training? Another one here is situation awareness and management and workload management as well. So these are just 7 pointers that if you want to walk away as a training team, are you focusing on these 7 competencies, which are obviously being brought through by ICAO? Are you meeting these? If not, then what can you do to enhance that? And what additional training possibly do you need to bring in to improve that? So that's just a little bit of food for thought for you to take away. But just before we round up and ask for questions, I just wanted to introduce to you what we are doing at SkyPeople. So we're really trying to collaborate with colleges, universities, and with airlines to bridge the gap between education and industry. We've said about certain skill sets are missing. So this is something that we are really trying to understand the challenges and barriers to the required competencies. We want to help create and support organisations young people want to work for. We want to bring that love back into the industry. That was something that EASA was talking about at a recent conference. How do we bring that love back, passion into the industry? Starting to see, I think, sort of the aftermath of COVID is still there, but things are sort of on the up. They're looking good. How can we make diversity and inclusion a priority to attract and retain talent? How can we help companies promote long-term, meaningful career pathways? And also, we want to understand competency-based training across industry and how we can support airlines shift that old learning mindset. And also, how can we as an industry, as a company, support cabin crew instructors and lecturers through this potential shift in learning. So I feel like I'm not used to just talking. Normally when I'm around people, I'll do workshops and talk to people, team or group exercises, because ultimately, you know, that's what we're all about. We're people. So I do feel like I have just been talking to a screen. But I'm going to pass you over to Claire now, who will just round things off. And we also have time for any questions, if there are any questions. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you everyone for taking the time out your evening to join us. I really hope that you have found it interesting and thought-provoking, and we would love it if you could get in touch with us further. We'd love to be able to support you in your industry, your airline, wherever you're working. As Emily mentioned, there's lots of things, lots of areas that we are working in and that we are doing to kind of help the development and support out there. If you're interested in workshops, any guest speaking, individual training and support, we even run team building days up in our training centre in Manchester, then feel free to get in touch with either of us. We've just put our email addresses there on the screen. We've got quite a big presence as well on social media. So do follow us and like us on all the usual social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook. We've got a YouTube channel. We are even on TikTok. So come and follow us and get in touch if we can do anything to support you further. I'm just going to have a quick look in the comment box just to see if there are any questions at all. I don't think there is. However, if you have got questions, pop them in the chat box and we can take them before we finish for this evening. I can't see that anyone is typing anything, so I am assuming then that we have no questions. But if you have, then do reach out to us. Again, email addresses are on the screen. And thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Just want to say thank you very much. That was so
Hello.
interesting. Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm stop sharing my screen. I don't need to share that. I'm good. Time no see.
I know it's been ages, but I'll join you on the 6th anyway, so I'd love to come and see you then.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, do come and see us.
And
But yeah, thank you.
no,
Thanks, Tess.
that's what it's so funny because I said to my son, I've got a Gen Z thing. Not I'm
Yeah.
thinking it was something to do with, I don't know, tech stuff. And he said, "Well, that's my generation." No, I said Gen Z. He said, "No, it's Gen Z."
Yeah, well, do you know, I have been challenged on Gen Z and Gen Z, but I normally just I have called them Gen Z. But when I was in America, because it was very much I was over in America for a conference and they say Gen Z. So that's why I thought, oh, maybe it's an American thing, but interesting. So they say they actually call themselves Gen Z.
Oh, right. Because I was just trying, because I'd heard of the term millennial, but
Yeah.
it meant I didn't know who that was. I'd heard snowflake. I didn't know who that was. So this was so interesting. It's
Oh,
really
I'm so
brought a lot of
pleased.
things to light. It really
Good,
has. So I really
good.
enjoyed it, Emily. So, and lovely to see you both as well.
Nice to see you too. But I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Perfect. That'd be lovely. Take care,
Yeah.
Emily. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
You're right, Julie. I can still see you. You're on mute.
Yeah, all good,
Hello.
thanks. How are you?
Right, thank you. Where are
Good.
you at? It's not your apartment behind you, is it?
What an interesting insight to that.
Oh, I'm pleased. Good.
Really, really good insight, honestly.
Good. Yeah, hopefully you can take something away from it,
Absolutely
because
have.
it's such a huge topic, and the issue is we've talked about it for so I feel like I've talked about it for ages now, and I feel like it's kind of like old information. In fact, there are still lots of people who probably still need to, just understand the different generations and
It's there with us, isn't it? Every day we see it, and we probably go and have a little whinge and a moan about it, but we don't really understand the whole thing. But yeah,
mm,
very, very
good.
interesting.
I'm pleased. So good. Well, I know I think Claire might have been in contact with you, hasn't she, recently? But hopefully we'll yeah, catch up with
Much
you
more soon.
soon. Yeah, but
Definitely.
thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it. Nice.
Good. Yeah, nice to see you. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.